Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Snyder with the Omnia Group, and welcome to Leadership versus Management. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in just another probably 30 seconds. If you will, though, I'd love to know where you're coming from. I am in Tampa, Florida, and I'm a very enthusiastic Tampa Bay Lightning fan, so I like to say we are home of the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. Tell me where you're joining from today. Maine. Nice. El Paso, Texas, welcome. This is always fun. Palm Desert, Fargo, North Dakota. Wow, we're covering the corners here. Pennsylvania, Arkansas, Rhode Island. Great, welcome. I'm so glad that everyone has joined us today from the different corners of our country. Super. Well, thank you for sharing. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So today we are talking about leadership versus management, the differences and how to be good at both. And I'll cover in just a moment why it's necessary to be good at both. But first, just a little bit, this isn't a sales pitch, but we like to always set context. We have these webinars on the third Tuesday of every month, and the Omnia Group loves to put these on. We are a 35 plus year old company based in Tampa, Florida. We were established by a husband and wife in 1985. And Heather, our CEO, is still at the helm. We are in the business of providing tools and resources and customized services to help organizations hire the best people and then develop them to their full potential. And we do that through our assessments. And we'll talk a little bit about leadership profiles today, and you'll have an opportunity to experience one of our assessments if you've never had a chance to do so, or you haven't had a chance to run your leadership style. So we'll be offering that toward the end of the workshop after we talk about these concepts of manager versus leader. So let's get on with it. Personal introduction. I am the Chief Revenue Officer here at Omnia. I head up sales, marketing, and client delivery, client success. I've been with the organization a little over a year and a half. I have 25 years, I'm pretty old, of sales experience, sales leadership, operations, and consulting, professional services delivery experience. And pride myself in being a great leader and always challenged by it. So this topic really resonated with me, and I wanted to give you a little backstory on how we came up with it. So Omnia has a host of partners that we work with who also use the Omnia resources for their direct clients. And I was on a call with one of our partners a couple of months ago, and we were talking to a joint client, and our partner, Mark Levy, was on the call with me. And we were talking about leadership and the competencies of this particular client's current leaders. And Mark made this point on the call about, were they as good at managing and were they as good as managers as they were as leaders? And that question really struck me. And I thought, wow, for years we've been talking about leadership and the differences. And it's almost like management and managers got a bad name, a bad word. You better be a good leader. And even when I went online and started looking at manager versus leader and definitions, a lot of the quotes and messaging out there is that management was a little bit negative. And I took this as a personal challenge because I pride myself, like I said, in being a good leader. And I'm a natural visionary. I'm a big idea person. I love people. I love engaging people. I focus a lot on culture. But Mark's point made me think about how good am I at managing? And have I been focusing too much on leading versus managing? So I took it as a bit of a personal challenge myself over the last couple of months. And I just share that with you openly here. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about why we need to be both. Particularly, a lot of our clients are small business and we wear many, many hats. But even if you're in a big business and you've got leaders of leaders working for you, you still need to manage to the bottom line to make sure you deliver on the results, that you deliver to your shareholders, that you hold your people accountable, and that you coach and do very tactical things. So we have to be good at both. So today we're going to talk about the differences of managing versus leading. We're going to talk about some of the common challenges that come up day to day and how you approach them from a management perspective versus a leadership perspective. some strategies for overcoming those challenges, and then how do you use insight? What can you do to develop further insight about yourself and others to really flourish and optimize your leadership and your management capability? So before we go any further, I would like for everyone, again in the chat, to just jot down the first word that comes to your mind when you hear manager. What are some characteristics, traits, common thoughts you have when you hear the word manager? Michael Scott. I love The Office. Deals with daily issues, small picture, keeps things moving in the right direction, process person who delegates, overseeing process and procedure, exactly. Motivator, referee at times, absolutely, have to deal with those conflicts, those challenges, and get people to all be on the same page, manage direction, delegate, oversight, all great words. Now, what comes to mind when you think of the word leader? Are any of those traits, characteristics different? Set the pace, visionary, inspire, an advocate for the business, advocate for the people, right? Leaders set the tone. Yeah, I like to say leaders are the thermostat. They set the temperature for the culture. Bold director. Great. I really appreciate the participation. These webinars, sometimes feel one way. So thank you so much for those of you who are sharing. And just one second, I'm having a little bit of a challenge getting my slides. There we go. So first of all, just talking about some staggering data. And again, if you've been on webinars such as this and you've been in a leadership or a hiring position, some of this is familiar. We know that management leadership is hard and not everyone succeeds at it. In fact, the most recent data shows that 60% of new managers fail within their first 2 years. And we at Omnia believe and follow this data closely. There's two things that come together here. One is training and development. And it's just staggering to know that 85% of new managers receive no formal training prior to becoming the new manager. They're put in those roles without any formal development. And organizations fail to pick high talent candidates 82% of the time. So quite often we know the best people in a role are put into the role because they're good at doing the individual contributor job, right? But they can't necessarily do the job that's needed as a leader. They fail to recognize others. They fail to bring their team on board. They fail to communicate. They fail to give feedback. They fail to just speak the truth, all of those things that it takes to be a successful leader and manager. So let's get into the definitions. Again, I really dove into this subject and tried to distinguish what is the difference between leader versus manager and how can we look at bringing those together. So leaders, a lot of the words that you already said, leaders inspire people to want to do something. The manager is the one who usually holds them accountable for doing that thing, for execution. And we talked about it's like processes and resources and getting people to get that direction and get it in place. So breaking it down, the key distinguishments probably between the two are best said here. Leaders are visionary. I think we all agreed to that in the chat and what was said already. Inspirational. They are challenging. A good leader really does always look at what are we doing today, but what do we need to be doing next? And what can we be doing differently? And how do we challenge ourselves, our organization to stretch? They're very communicative and able to communicate and get people on board with that vision and completely, almost always big picture. So it really comes down to a leader is usually asking what and why. What do we need to be doing next? What are we doing today that's not working? What do we need to be doing differently? And then the why behind it so that we're understanding those big symptomatic causal issues. So now shifting over to managers, the management focus has to be on execution, right? On getting it done. So management tends to be more directive, setting up and establishing those processes. So being process oriented to make sure that the engine is running. People focused. Managers have to coach and give feedback, hire and develop and provide that ongoing formal and informal learning and coaching, and then really focused on the results, watching that dashboard and making sure we're making it. And again, neither can go without, right? You can't have a visionary and a big picture plan without looking at making sure you're tracking and getting those results. But a key differentiator, again, when you look at manager versus leader and what we ask is the manager is thinking, how are we going to get there and when? So leadership, we're setting the pace, we're setting the tone for the direction, the big strategy, what we need to do and why we need to do it. Management is thinking about how do we do it? How do I get it done with our resources and our people? And when do we get it done by to track? And so they are different skill sets. I see the question in the chat, Florence, and we got some great questions submitted by the attendees today about, how do you know if you're a leader and how do you address and can leadership be born versus taught? And I like both of those questions. And we're going to get to that and many more as we get into this. But they are different skill sets. And sometimes key is to recognize what is needed in your business. What are you really good at? And where do you need to shore that up? So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into traits and different types of leaders. And if you have to be both, how do you shore it up? So let's talk first about some of the common challenges that happen. So first of all, one of the main challenges that comes in leadership and management is we try to manage by position. So we think that, people will do what I've asked them to do just because I've asked them to do it. Boy, do I learn that lesson every single day. Quite often, it's not necessarily done just because you've asked. People have to believe in it, or people have to understand why and make sure they have the time and the resource and the capability to do it. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons newer leaders learn is positional leadership doesn't get you very far, particularly when you're working with a mature staff, a confident, experienced staff. Another big challenge is just because you're the leader doesn't mean that everybody has to do it the way that you do it. When I first became a leader, one of the best pieces of advice I got from my manager and mentor was not to expect everybody to get to the same outcome the same way I do, and to be okay with letting people get to their success the way they can. As long as they weren't hurting the organization, they were making their achievements, they were hitting the numbers, hitting the targets, they didn't have to absolutely do it Heather's way. So some tips to think about that is that people will follow people always, not the titles. So whether you're a leader or a manager, you've got to get the people behind you and you've got to make sure your team is set up to succeed. You also always have to focus on the with them. If you haven't heard that before, that stands for what's in it for me. So just because I've asked someone to do better at forecasting doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do that. They're going to think that that's just a benefit for me. They've got to understand how getting a forecast is going to help them get more clear about how they prioritize their time, how they can have more balance in their day because they're going about it in a prioritized fashion, and how likely they'll be successful in the role. Those are some of the things you got to think about when you're asking somebody to do something more. And then outcomes matter more than process. Just like I said before, it doesn't matter if they do it exactly your way, as long as they get the outcome and they're not doing anything that hurts the business or puts the client at risk in the meantime. And then it's also about checking our egos. I think one of the misnomers of leadership is that, we've climbed our way to the top, and really it's inverted. We're here to serve and make sure our entire team is successful, and to be able to show that we're not perfect, to laugh at our mistakes, to show our vulnerability, which goes back to that question about skill set. There are things I'm just not good at doing that I've got to feel comfortable asking others on my team to do, or asking for help if I don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to do it. Because another key driver of successful leadership is growing your capacity, being able to do more so you have that time to think. And management is delegating. So thinking about how do you ask others to come and help you. Another key component here to overcome this positional leadership challenge is the need to build trust and credibility. And I'm a big fan of Gandhi. So he comes into me most when we start talking about, inspiration and character and trust. And I just love this quote. What you do says what is most important to you. It's your action that expresses your priorities. Talk doesn't matter as much at all as what you walk and what you actually do. So key to building trust and credibility on your team is to say what you mean and mean what you say. Be very impeccable with your words. Words matter. People listen to those words. And again, I can be a tops of the tree person sometimes, go with my gut. So one of the things I've put in check is, am I really being mindful of what I say when and the impact it might have? Another key focus of being a successful leader and manager is not over-promising and under-delivering. And you've got to have those common traits together. Again, a leader seeing the path, seeing the course of what's needing to be done. But from a manager perspective, again, asking that how and when. What's really realistic? What's doable? Have I put too much on the team? Is it possible to get it? So being careful to not over-promise and under-deliver on those goals. So when you're setting goals or when you're establishing changes, think about these questions to ask yourself. First of all, are they realistic? Have I set a realistic outcome, success measure, goal, objective for the company this month, this quarter, this year, for the next 3 to 5? If I'm going to get ready to change something, have I really thought about the change and what the purpose of it is, and is it the right time? Have I really set about doing this? Sometimes we leaders who have a high capacity for multiple things, excitement with new shiny objects, we can have a tendency to ideate a lot and not really think about the reality of, can we do all these things at once? So prioritization, thinking about your team, your resources, and so forth. And then, are my expectations in check? So am I creating stress on the organization, or am I creating inspiration? Have I created something that everyone wants to line up to do? Or is it something that I just think is a great idea, but it's going to completely stress my team out and undermine everything else we've tried to do? So those are great things to keep in mind when you're thinking about change or rolling out your goals and objectives from both that leadership, big picture view, but the management, how and when. The second common challenge we have is just communication, getting our message across. And I thought this quote was just extremely, again, staggering, that 71% of employees believe their leaders do not spend enough time communicating goals and plans. If you're a leader on this call, I would imagine that you think you communicate all the time. But unfortunately, we have to do so in many different ways. People do need to hear messages different times, different ways, and different things, one-on-one, email messages, reinforcing it, town halls, team meetings, functional meetings, and not only telling people what we're setting out to do, but also communicating where we are in our progress. There was a lot of data around that employees don't think they're getting enough update on progress. So we set out at the beginning of the year with a plan, a vision, a goal, but where do we stand? So one recommendation is, we're sitting at the mid-year right now. We're halfway through 2021. We got half a year left. Have you established mid-year check-ins with your team? Have you looked at, sat down and had a format and a framework for looking at, let's look at the year, let's look at the year so far. Have you accomplished what you've set out to do? What have you learned so far? What would you still like to work on? Where are you at in terms of your goals and objectives? How are you going to get there? What are some of your challenges and threats? So think about doing that mid-year check-in if you haven't yet. It's a great thing outside the annual performance review, because it's not about my yearly performance. It's about this year, these objectives, these goals, and it's a great management technique. So when you're communicating, setting clear expectations, doing those frequent process checks, having action plans and then reviewing the plans, committing to a continuous development, and then feedback both ways. So this isn't just feedback to your employees, but also getting feedback from them on what you think you need to be doing differently and how you can support them. In one of my companies that I used to work for, we used to give a Sales Manager of the Year award every year. And it was employee driven. So the employees would vote for the Sales Manager of the Year, and employees across the entire organization would vote. So it wasn't just a way that sales manager was managing their individual team, but it was also how well were they impacting the organization and making a difference through the entire team. And one year, a colleague of mine, Brian, won the award. And I loved what his team said about him. So they had individual quotes of people who had nominated him that came up and presented the award before they announced Brian. And the message was, Brian never gripes down. And that just really resonated with me once again. We as leaders and managers have to always toe that line between representing the organization to our people and representing our people to the organization. And it can sometimes get challenging when maybe we don't have the resources or the budget we need, or maybe we can't say yes to the sales team for something that they've asked for. Or maybe customer service wants to hire more people and we just can't do that right now. The challenge is you can't complain about it to your customer service department. You can't gripe about one function to your team or to your direct reports, because what does that look like to them? Like you don't have a handle on the challenges, that you're just as victimized by the situation maybe as they are. So I took that again and intact and thought about, when it comes to communication, one element is to never gripe down. Find someone else outside that you can share your grievances with, but don't share them with your people. So some reminders on communication. The key is to consider that, what is my job is to engage my team and make sure they're firing on all cylinders. They can do it. So to do that, you've got to connect regularly with them. You've got to find ways to influence. Again, back to that, what's in it for them? What's the benefit of what they need to do to be successful? Seek that feedback, and then also give feedback. And giving feedback isn't something everyone wakes up in the morning and looks forward to doing. So there are wonderful courses, wonderful ways and tools of giving feedback and matching that to the person you're giving it to. So if you want to brush up on that, we're here to help or point you in the right direction on how to do that. So take time to develop yourself as well. Another key thing is, when it comes to communicating, is knowing your style. And of course, we're an assessment company, so we're going to talk about knowing your traits, knowing your strengths. And just a key hone in here on communication style as a leader. There are two different kinds of communicators. There are relational communicators, and there are more analytical communicators. So the key is to know the difference, and again, to know who you're communicating with. So if I'm going to tell you, I'm a relational communicator. I go on feelings. I go on getting people engaged. I want to read the room. I want people to like me. I want people to like my ideas. But not necessarily everyone I communicate with is going to appreciate that. So I've got to think about using facts and data, not getting too upset if the initial idea that I put out there isn't, given all a thumbs up from people, and really making sure that I'm giving people time to analyze and process what I'm throwing out there on a regular basis. Now, if you're an analytical leader that does appreciate and usually come more from a facts-based orientation of just, this is the data, this is the facts, this is what we need to do. Remember that you've got to take time to connect with people, particularly if you're delivering that message or you're managing and motivating people that are more relational oriented. They're going to want one-on-one time with you. They're going to want recognition where you might not need or think recognition isn't so important. They're going to want that. So considering feelings along with facts is really key. So the key, again, know yourself, know who you are, and know who you're leading and managing. The final challenge we're going to talk about is just overcoming obstacles. And these are interpersonal complications, organizational hurdles, and physical barriers, like what we're dealing with today, where most of us have jumped into some form of remote leadership and management. And those are all challenges when it gets down to leading and inspiring and managing and executing on outcomes. So the key here is to constantly stop and make sure everyone is together. So back to, have you given explicit, detailed information about what you're asking people to do, seeking input from people on what they think we need to do, and allowing that time for questions so that clearly everyone is on the same page. And again, back to that, I've told them once, do I have to tell them again? Or I've expressed this once, do I need to keep saying it? You do. You've got to do it in different formats, different modalities, on every kind of common platform you can to communicate to your team, and make sure it's two ways so that people can ask questions and do check-ins. So following up and following through is key. And then delegating, we can't do all of this ourselves. We've just talked about that already. So delegating appropriately where you can build your capacity to do more and build your team's capacity to do more and be successful and thrive in the roles. Everybody wants challenge. Everybody wants to know what's next for me. Most people do. It's been one of the common themes that's coming up in my one-on-ones, this mid-year check-in is, what do you see for my future? What do you see for our company's future? What do you see for me personally? How can I grow and develop in this role? Setting guidelines for what you expect people to do and being clear about timelines and, when is it reasonable to do something? And then trusting, but verifying. We talk a lot about, leaders inspire, and then we get out of the way so people can do it. Well, yes, but you got to make sure people have done it. And again, that they've, not just because you're checking up on them and being a micromanager, but it's keeping the business in track. It's making sure you're reaching your goals and objectives, but also supporting your team to make sure they have the resources that they need, or that the project's going well for them and that they're not suffering any unnecessary or unidentified stress that you're not aware of. So trusting that it's going to work out, but verifying that it is, and verifying how it's working or not working is really key to making sure everybody's together. And then understanding mistakes are going to happen, learning from them, doing debriefs, doing after action reviews after you've done a major project, bringing people together, reviewing what worked, what didn't, what do we want to tweak next time, and recognizing, we had a few glitches. Nobody's perfect. We all probably make at least one mistake every single day. I love this, Raina. Yes, leadership is empowerment. And it's also then empowering them and then supporting them and making sure that they are able to do what you've asked them to do and that it's working successfully. So when it comes down to going through these obstacles, think about, just again, some check questions for yourself. How do I communicate the vision across modalities in multiple ways that match the individual and the way that they like to be communicated? How well am I listening? How well am I giving feedback? How well am I holding myself accountable and holding others accountable? And again, my own personal challenge is asking myself this as well. I think leadership is a tough job. And it's one of the things reason why I love being here and being in the work that I am is that we all get to learn together. So I'd love to hear what kind of challenges you're having with doing that and holding yourself accountable, and we can prop each other up. And then how often am I communicating that where things stand? Am I giving everybody a quick snapshot, dashboards, visuals, metrics, check-ins of, here's what we set out to do and here's where we are so far and here's how we're going to get there. I think if we think we've over-communicated it, we probably have to still communicate it at least 3 to 5 more times in the next several weeks to make sure that message has gotten across. So use your resources. That's the key to the success. And of course, I am going to talk about the leadership report here because it's one of the best resources that I know of to understand what your traits are naturally and then what you have to build out, because nobody can be all of these things. So we are offering a free leadership assessment today that takes 10 minutes to complete. Emma will put in the chat a link to how to do that. How to get there. And then if you miss it or want to come back to us, we'll be sending this out in the recording as well, this offer. But it is a great offer to, look at taking 10-minute online assessment, and it will come back with what your strengths are, where you may have some challenges, and we'll set you on the path to putting together an action plan. We have at Omnia 17 different leadership styles that we have identified over the course of our 35 years of work. We work with multiple industries, 15 major industries across the commercial world and the public sector. And we've benchmarked 200 different specific jobs that cover a variety of different functions, from Chief Information Officer, Chief Executive Officer, Sales Manager, VP of Sales, Service Manager, Parts Manager, Client Service, Customer Success. So if you think about all those different leadership functions, they have different elements that they require in the job. So this is a listing of our titles. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, but you can see where there might be differences and different needs based on the organization that job is in, as well as the function that the leader is in, and where the team is and where they are in their goals. Some organizations are in need of a visionary because they're setting out on a new path, maybe starting a new product, maybe starting a whole new business. You need visionary leadership at the helm. Other other businesses may be operational focus and just need to execute. So they need more logistical drivers or problem solvers, planners, tactical leaders. So it really does depend on where the organization is, where their market is, where they are in their business cycle, and what the team looks like and what kind of leader they need. The question that I got about, are leaders born or can they be taught? I believe, and I think our data has shown over the years, that they can be taught, but there are natural tendencies with leadership. So the key is understanding what it is. There are certain traits that we have identified that make it very easy for leaders if you have those traits. For instance, if you're highly assertive, if you are, willing to put yourself out there, take risks, take chances, speak up in a crowd, you've got that confidence factor, leadership is going to come more naturally to you. If you're highly resilient and you can handle the rest of the team not necessarily liking you, but respecting you, you're going to be a more natural leader. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a successful one, though, because highly assertive, highly confident leaders can be my way or the highway. So you still have to develop some traits and some skills on how do you temper that message? How do you bring everybody along versus just the one? How do you lead from the back as well as the front? So it is a combination of natural traits and tendencies and skills and behaviors. I don't think there's any leader who has the will to be a leader who couldn't be successful, but you've got to have the will then to learn what you don't know or what you aren't naturally good at. So that's when the skill comes in. But if you have the will to learn the skill and you have the will to lead, you more than likely could be successful in a number of different leadership capacities. It might just, again, depend on the organization, the culture, where they are in the business cycle, the market, and what the team needs. The key is truly knowing who you are, being self-aware, and then being aware of the people that you lead and the people that you manage. So it goes together, and then adapting and applying constantly. This works in a circle. Who am I? How am I performing as a leader today? What's needed for this company to be successful? What do I have to work on? Who am I trying to lead? Being aware of what their needs are, aware of others, and then constantly adapting and applying. Leadership is never a one size fits all. I'm just going to go out and be this person today and stay that way. It's evolving. Like I said, Mark gave me a little bit of a reality check in that conversation and put me on a course to really thinking about leader versus manager, knowing that there's some things I could shore up based on what the organization needs and where we are. And I share that, checking my ego at the door. Because I think it's just something that everyone can benefit from, and I hope you'll take that with you today. So what I would encourage everyone to do is look at yourself first, take advantage of the offer if you haven't done your leadership development report with us yet, create your plan, use your resources, communicate your needs to people you feel comfortable doing that. If you've got some areas you want to shore up, ask for help, look to your team, look to your peers, look to your colleagues to get help. Sign up for a course if there's something that you're not familiar with doing or feeling comfortable, and then put yourself on a path and hold yourself accountable. We have a job aid to helping you do this. You can download this again with the link that we'll share, but it is basically a plan, an action plan for you to put in place once you've identified what are your strengths, what are some challenges you have, and some things you want to do to work on identifying those. So Emma has put that in the chat. We will make sure that you get this job aid for those of you listening to the recording in the message that we send. And a reminder, the little plug, we have a number of reports to look at in terms of your team and yourself. So we've offered the leadership report today. I encourage you, if you haven't consider doing a team analysis of your entire team. If you're a leader of managers, considering looking at your team dynamics and where the strengths and natural traits are and where you might need to shore that up. I imagine where there's differences, there's conflict, there's challenge. So the best way is to gain that insight and to look at how do you identify where some of those gaps are and where some of those strengths are and set a course. So I'll turn it over to questions. And I do have some questions, again, that were submitted prior to the event that I can go through, but I'd also ask if you have any questions, you go ahead and submit it in the chat window. One of the questions that came up that I'll address while I wait for others to come in the chat was about EQ. And that's, the emotional intelligence, the emotional quotient of a leader and a manager, and the importance of that. It is incredibly important. A good leader and a good manager needs to understand the emotions that are going on day to day. They have to be aware again of their emotions, and have awareness of the emotions of other. And then ideally, when you have a high EQ, you're able to manage through that. So that's that whole point about being the thermostat versus the thermometer. So if everybody in the room is all flared up and tempers are getting high, the leader has to set that tone, has to bring down the temperature, and has to be able to cut through what's causing the emotion, what's causing the tension, what's happening here. So EQ plays in really, really strongly on this. And again, there are some great resources out there on developing EQ. Some people come by it very naturally through just building experiences and maturity. It can be developed. It certainly can be developed. So happy to help with resources on that. I love that question. There was another question. How can employees step up and act as a leader or manager when there isn't one? I love this question too. I love all these questions, but I think that, and I meant to say this, so I'm glad I just saw this question. Everyone is a leader, and we're all a leader in our own right, especially once we've hit a certain level of experience in our career, and our peers look to us for leadership. Our customers look to us for leadership. Whatever situation in, someone has to take the helm. So you don't have to be a positional leader with direct reports to be a leader. And if there's not strong leadership in your company, then I think the key is where there's a hole, fill it, if you have the will and the desire to do it. So I think it's a matter of just finding ways to make that impact. I think another good piece of advice I got early on when I was an individual contributor not leading people was about complaints again. If you're going to come forward with a complaint, you have to have a recommendation for a suggested solution. So I think that's one key way to step up. If you're not seeing leadership, or if you're seeing things in the company that need to get done, make sure when you raise your voice, you make a recommendation and you're willing to be part of implementing it. It's probably going to get you put in a leadership role, by the way, if you do that. Most people get promoted by being the ones who take action. All right. The last thing, and I see a question about sharing the link for the evaluation. Do you mean the job aid? Amanda, if you're still there, we'll get that over to you. We can follow up with an email as well. Yes. Okay. We'll make sure that you do all get the job aid. And we might not have had the link today. I just realized, remember I said we all make mistakes every day? That might be my mistake here. So we will follow up with an email for all of you on the webinar to make sure you get that. The last question I got, and I'll wrap with this, was tips on setting measurable goals. And I think this is key, again, when we're talking about the difference between leader and manager. And there's another webinar that we did on goal setting. So I would highly recommend that webinar, as well as a webinar we put on setting goals. And it was focused a lot on SMART goals, the acronym SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. That's the acronym for SMART. So that's really key to having a measurable goal, is to having that SMART methodology. So it's an open source acronym out there. So you could quickly Google SMART. It'll give you a framework for it. Or you could, again, check out our webinar or blog with more details on how to set those goals. But following the SMART, SMART methodology, is my recommendation. So with that, I will share my contact information for follow-up. If you take advantage of the leadership assessment, you will also get a free consultation. So we will gladly sit down with you and work with you on your action plan and your leadership report. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm a quote freak, so I have to end with the quote. Again, that to me, that summed us up. Management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right things. And we need both. To be successful, we've got to do the right things, and we've got to do them right. So thank you all. Here's my contact info. Please stay in touch and keep the conversation going. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.